Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, August 25th, 2025. All right, so we have a lot of stuff to get through today. Lots of stuff happening. It's one of those days I wonder if I put too many stories up in our top news section, but just so much to cover. I really want to focus, of course, on the horrific situation in Gaza, so we're going to start with that. So the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Smotrich says stay in Gaza City and die of hunger. So Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has told the head of the Israeli military that anyone who remains in Gaza City after an IDF evacuation order can die of hunger or surrender. And this was reported by the Times of Israel, citing a TV report from Israel's Channel 12, a report about this meeting that took place between the government ministers and the head of the IDF. So Smotrich said and this is his comments to IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, quote, "We ordered you to carry out a quick operation. In my opinion, you can besiege them. Whoever doesn't evacuate, don't let them. No water, no electricity. They can die of hunger or surrender. This is what we want, and you're capable of doing it," end quote. So saying, we want you to use starvation. It's been clear that Israel's been using starvation as a weapon, and he, in these comments to the IDF Chief of Staff, Smotrich is making it very clear, that's the idea here. We will issue this evacuation order, and whoever doesn't leave, starve them to death. And the Channel 12 report said that during the same meeting, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer said that President Trump fully supports Israel's plans to conquer Gaza City, which, as we have been covering, involves the forced displacement of over 1 million civilians amid a famine. It's now been confirmed by the IPC. We'll get more into this in another story, that famine is taking place specifically in Gaza City. So Netanyahu said during this meeting that Trump supports this, but he wants it to be done quick. He wants a quick and decisive operation. I don't really think there's any way that this is going to be quick and decisive, this slaughter that they have planned for Gaza City, because again, it requires them to either move, a huge number of civilians, or kill them either by starvation or bombing. And thousands of Palestinians have fled Gaza City, but there's no sign that there's been like a major evacuation. And there's several reasons for that. One is that many of the Palestinians there have just moved so many times. They're just done. I've seen some quotes from people and saying, we'd rather die here than be forced to move again. And then the other factor is, they don't think they're going to be safe. They've, since the end of May, thousands of Palestinians have been killed going and trying to get food. It's over 2,000 now who have been killed. So they don't trust the Israeli army to tell them, if you go down this, this is the safe corridor. And Israel continues to bomb southern Gaza. So, they have no reason to believe that they're going to be safe. So you have this combination here. You have lots of civilians staying, and you have a very influential, powerful Israeli minister saying whoever stays can die of hunger, starve them to death. So let's see here. And also the Palestinians in Gaza City, they know, if they're reading the media, this is very clear and explicit that Israel's plans for Gaza City involve the complete destruction of the city. And there was another report that the IDF told the Israeli government that it will likely take months or possibly over a year to demolish the city. And that's what they want. They want the complete destruction of Gaza City. And they know that means once they leave, they're never going to be able to go back. The Channel 12 report said that Zamir, the IDF Chief of Staff, clashed with Smotrich and also with Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir over the length of time the plan to take over Gaza City will take. Smotrich's call to starve the remaining Palestinians to death, that aligns with previous comments that he made. In April of this year, about a month after Israel imposed a total blockade on Gaza, Smotrich said that Israel would not allow a grain of wheat to enter the Strip. And now the Israeli government, their narrative is they're trying to claim that they're not responsible for the starvation that's happening. And then last year, of course, I mean, these are, to me, infamous words at this point, and this stuff is going to go down in history. Smotrich said at a conference last year that it may be justified and moral for Israel to starve 2 million Palestinians to death, but that the world would not allow it to happen. And again, this, even still today, you read in the, Western U.S. media about Smotrich, they kind of try to portray him as a fringe figure who doesn't have that much influence. But the fact is, he has an enormous amount of influence over Netanyahu because of the threat to quit the government. He's in these meetings about when they're making their plans. And saying things like this. So this is the Israeli government that's in power, that the U.S. is helping conduct this genocide and starvation campaign. But so this is his quote from August 2024. Smotrich said, quote, "We are bringing in aid because there is no choice. We can't, in the current global reality, manage a war. Nobody will let us cause 2 million civilians to die of hunger, even though it might be justified and moral until our hostages are returned," end quote. And so, when Netanyahu, at the end of May, when they finally let a trickle of aid to enter Gaza, which was mainly through the GHF, Netanyahu explaining it to Smotrich and the other, what they call hardliners in the Israeli government, his reasoning for allowing just a tiny amount of aid in was basically, we need to do this to ensure that we can keep, maintain American support. So the whole thing's a facade, not because they clearly want to starve all these people and kill all these people. And it's all just PR. And you have so many pro-Israeli propagandists. They're flying in influencers now to send them into like the buffer zone in Gaza and to stand around pallets and say, look, there's food everywhere. This is all fake narrative. Well, there's food there, but look at the Palestinian children who are starving to death, and not just children, adults. And we'll get more into that in the next story here. So the next one, 18 Palestinians starved to death in Gaza over 3 days. So Gaza hospitals have recorded 18 more malnutrition deaths in Gaza over the past 3 days, according to press releases from Gaza's health ministry, as Palestinians continue to starve due to the U.S.-backed Israeli siege. In its latest release on Sunday, the health ministry said that at least 8 Palestinians, including one child, had starved to death over the previous 24-hour period. And on Friday, as I covered in the last show, the UN-backed Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or the IPC, confirmed that famine was taking place in the Gaza governorate, which includes Gaza City and nearby towns, and that more than 500,000 people in the area were facing catastrophic conditions characterized by starvation, destitution, and death. Here's a baby suffering from malnutrition in Gaza City. The IPC said that conditions are expected to worsen and that between mid-August and the end of September, famine is expected to spread to Deir al-Balah, central Gaza, and Khan Yunis in the south. The Israeli government and its supporters are denying that famine is occurring, pointing to the fact that many children suffering from severe malnutrition had pre-existing medical conditions. But as we've been talking about, there's a lot of things wrong with that framing. The most vulnerable are always the first to be impacted when famine sets in. There have also been many cases recorded of people suffering from severe malnutrition who have no pre-existing conditions. And also, according to this report from Haaretz, and I've seen this elsewhere, some of these so-called pre-existing conditions didn't exist before the blockade. So, it's all, a lot of this is just compounded on top of all these shortages and food shortages, medical shortages, a lack of clean water and everything. Of course, this is what's killing people. And the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, they published a big report on August 21st, and I would recommend everybody go read it. It's tough to read, but it's based on virtual tours of hospitals and health centers in Gaza. And they actually examined the cases of 27 children and found that 17 of them deteriorated into a state of severe malnutrition without pre-existing health conditions. 17 out of the 27, and 10 suffered from previous illnesses. This is from the report from Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper. It said, quote, based on our conversations, a simple fact emerged. Anyone who claims that the images of starvation in the Strip are a result of acute genetic or other diseases and not due to a grave shortage of food are lying to themselves, end quote. So the IPC said that in order to prevent further catastrophe, there must be an immediate ceasefire and lifting of all restrictions on aid entering Gaza. But Israel's, of course, planning this major escalation, and Trump has made very clear that he's going to support whatever Israel does. He's basically said that it's all up to Israel. And it's just monstrous what he is doing and supporting in Gaza. So the next one here, virtual tours of Gaza clinics expose the scale of horror. So, I mean, again, I would just recommend going and reading this report from Haaretz. We have the archived version on the page at antiwar.com, so you can get past the paywall. But again, essentially virtual tours from doctors, and you could see some of the children here. It's just so sad and so horrific. And many of the doctors they spoke with were U.S. American doctors, British doctors volunteering in Gaza. Also, they spoke with Palestinian doctors. But essentially, they just brought them around, on Zoom or Face, or, however they were talking to them. And they just showed them what the conditions are like. They talked to different parents, and the doctors talked about specific cases of children here. And it's just so horrible. And this is, they're being starved. It's not like this is some crisis that's just happening out of nowhere. These children are being starved by Israel with support from the U.S. And it's a genocide, and this is just going on, and the whole world can see it. We're getting reports actually from the people under, the siege, facing the genocide, and it just goes on. And Trump continues to support this. And I mean, it's just, I'm just out of words. I say things are horrific all the time, but it feels like, I got to think of better words to describe this, because it's just another level of atrocity that we're seeing, and we're just seeing it happen, unfold, and nothing is being done to stop it by the one guy that can stop it, and that is President Trump. All right, so the next one here, the IDF kills 64 Palestinians in Gaza over 24 hours. So Gaza's health ministry said on Sunday that Israeli forces killed 64 Palestinians and wounded 278 over the previous 24-hour period as relentless U.S.-backed Israeli attacks continue across the Strip. The health ministry said that among the dead were 19 Palestinians who were killed while attempting to reach aid. Witnesses told the AP that Israeli troops killed at least 4 people who were attempting to reach a distribution site run by the GHF near the Netzarim corridor in central Gaza. The health ministry said that since the GHF began operating at the end of May, at least 2,095 Palestinian aid seekers have been killed. 2,095 people killed while attempting to get food. It's just another, again, this is just another level. I mean, when has anything else like this happened in recent history in this century? It's just unprecedented what's happening in Gaza. And there's also heavy Israeli airstrikes. This is a funeral for a young boy who was killed by an airstrike in Gaza City. And so they've continued kind of the ramped up attacks on Gaza City where this famine is taking place. And of course, the Israeli government and all of its propagandists are denying, that the famine's happening, and really just seeing a lot of sick stuff from them on social media. All right, so the next one here, Netanyahu thwarted 7 Gaza ceasefire deals. So this article is from Middle East Eye, and it is based on a big report from Israel's Channel 13 that they spoke with senior American and Israeli officials. And they said that Israel has blocked the ceasefire agreement on 7 occasions during the nearly 2 years of its devastating military campaign in Gaza. The official said that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was chiefly responsible, often bowing to pressure from far-right ministers, including Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. Matthew Miller, former spokesman for the U.S. State Department, said that at the start of the war in October 2023, Hamas was ready to release some hostages. Miller said, quote, "We have been trying to get through to the government of Israel to tell them that. But Washington could not get anyone in there to take us seriously," end quote. So Miller had a lot to say in this interview. And of course, I mean, Miller was lying. He was I guess that's the job. If you're a spokesman for the U.S. State Department, you lie. But this is the second time. I know he did an interview recently where he said he believed Israel was committing war crimes in Gaza, including while he was the State Department spokesman. At the time, he was denying everything. But just more evidence. And I mean, if you listen to this show, if you read antiwar.com, it was clear that Netanyahu, he had all these tactics, and this gets into some of them. And Miller talked about them, him saying, we're not going to give up the Philadelphia corridor in the middle of negotiations and all these little tactics to do it. And it was obvious at the time. One reason why it was obvious because we at antiwar.com read Israeli media. And this stuff was not getting through to the U.S. media, that it was very clearly Netanyahu was the chief obstacle to a deal. All right, so the next one here, West Bank village devastated as Israel uproots thousands of olive trees. This article's from the Cradle. So the Israeli army has uprooted thousands of olive trees. Get all these ads. Sorry. And I know I should probably use an ad blocker for this. Anyway, sorry. So the Israeli army has uprooted thousands of olive trees in the West Bank village of Al-Mughayir in just the past 3 days as part of a collective punishment campaign against Palestinian residents in the village. Olive farming is the backbone of Palestinian agriculture, and olive trees in the West Bank are often hundreds of years old, some even over 1,000 years old, and are deeply tied to Palestinian identity, representing steadfastness and their historical connection to the land. The Israeli army began uprooting the trees on Thursday while also carrying out raids on homes and imposing a siege and curfew, preventing all movement into and out of the village located northeast of Ramallah. After the Israeli occupation forces ended the curfew and withdrew on Sunday, residents immediately began trying to replant the uprooted trees. Think about if you got a fruit tree, like how long it takes to get fruit trees established and producing fruit. And in the West Bank, these olive trees take a long time to get established, and they go in and they destroy these very old olive groves. And it just says so much about what the Israeli occupation is. I forget what their justification here is. Let's see if they have it, but just completely BS justification to destroy these trees. But it goes to show, they're after their livelihood. They want to uproot them. I mean, it's just, there's so much symbolism in these acts. And this is something settlers often do. They'll go in and chop down trees. This is the Israeli military uprooting thousands of trees in this place. And someone pointed out to me today that in Deuteronomy, in the Torah, it is forbidden to cut down fruit trees, even in enemies' fruit trees, yet the IDF does this. All right, so the next one here, Israel launches heavy strikes on Yemen's capital. So the Israeli Air Force launched heavy airstrikes on Yemen's capital, Sana'a, on Sunday, as the Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, have continued their blockade of Israeli shipping and attacks on Israeli territory in response to Israel's genocidal war on the Gaza Strip. Yemeni media said that the strike targeted a power plant and an oil facility, and that at least 6 people were killed and 86 were injured. Israel also claimed that it targeted the Yemeni presidential palace in Sana'a, which it said was located within a military site. I didn't see confirmation of that from Yemeni media, but these seem to be pretty heavy airstrikes. And they've typically targeted energy infrastructure. The last attack occurred last week when the Israeli Navy struck another power plant in Sana'a. And that was a typical target of the U.S. bombing campaign, energy infrastructure like the Ras Issa fuel port, where the U.S. massacred 80 civilians in one attack during the bombing campaign. This was in April of this year. And Sunday's strikes came after the Israeli military claimed that a Houthi missile that was fired on Israel on Friday was a cluster bomb for the first time. The Israeli military said that the missile broke up in the air and one small submunition landed in the yard of a home in the central Israeli town of Ginnatin, but no casualties were reported. And the typical background that I put in here, I'm not going to go through everything just because we have so many stories to go through. But the next one here is important. Israel is preparing a target bank for attacks on Yemen after U.S. failure. Another article here from the Cradle citing Israeli media, the Israeli news site Walla, reported that Israel is preparing a target bank for a large-scale campaign against the Yemeni armed forces and Ansar Allah movement. And according to the report, the Mossad and Israel's military intelligence are working to compile a large target bank to strike at Ansar Allah's key centers of gravity. Officials are saying that Israel must collect many targets which could be simultaneously struck, aimed at inflicting severe damage, unlike the recent U.S. operation which failed to decisively weaken the Houthis. The report notes that there was already a failed Israeli attempt to assassinate Mohammed Abd al-Karim al-Raghmari, the Yemeni Armed Forces Chief of Staff. They said they've already tried to kill him and failed. The thing is, I mean, they're basically saying, why don't we bomb them harder? And that was the whole idea of Operation Rough Rider, they called it, when Trump bombed Yemen for a month and a half. Just completely unleashed the U.S. military, and it was a complete failure. And that was with U.S. aircraft carriers, 2 aircraft carriers off the coast of Yemen, like constantly bombing, and that failed. So I don't think the Israelis on their own are going to be able to do more damage than the U.S. did in that bombing campaign. But I think the Houthis are a big problem, a big thorn in their side with the impact they've had on shipping, and even just kind of keeping, just firing the occasional missile and drone. Not really occasional. It seems like almost daily we see that they never really do any damage. Occasionally there's been missiles that get through, but just keeping up those attacks, like the pressure on Israel. They really want to get rid of the Houthis, but I don't think they really have the ability to do it. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. OKs long-range cruise missiles for Ukraine. So this story is concerning. So the Wall Street Journal reported on Saturday that the U.S. has approved a deal that will arm Ukraine with thousands of extended-range attack munition air-launched missiles, or ERAMs, which have a significantly further range than other missiles that the U.S. has sent into the proxy war. 2 U.S. officials told the Journal that the ERAMs can hit targets up to 250 miles away, nearly 100 miles further than the range of the Army tactical missile systems, the ATACMS, munitions that the U.S. began providing Ukraine in 2023. So I have an error here. I think it's actually the ERAMs can hit targets up to 280 miles, not 250. I have to double check that. The ATACMS range is 190 miles. So either way, 250 or 280, that's significantly more than the ATACMS. And the deal will provide Ukraine with 3,350 of these ERAM missiles as part of an $850 million weapons package that will be mainly funded by European countries. This year, NATO began a new scheme to provide Ukraine with more U.S. weapons in deals funded by other NATO allies, known as the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List, or the PEARL initiative. And the ERAMs are expected to arrive in Ukraine within 6 weeks, and the U.S. Officials said that the Ukrainian military will need Pentagon approval to use them, which means that the U.S. will be working very closely with Ukraine on launching these missile strikes. So this Wall Street Journal report, they kind of buried the lead here. The headline was about the Trump administration blocking ATACMS strikes on Russian territory, which the Biden administration first greenlit toward the end of 2024, which was a big escalation. Russia responded by altering their nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. So it shows how serious of an escalation this was. So this report says that since late spring, the U.S. has not allowed Ukraine to fire the ATACMS into Russia. So they lead with that. So I read the report. I said, well, that's good, because it's pretty provocative to directly support missile strikes on Russia. But then you read a little further, and it's like, oh, well, now they're going to send them this even longer range missile, which suggests to me that they're getting prepared to support these long range attacks inside Russia again. Which, I mean, this is serious stuff. As I said, Russia's response was changing their nuclear doctrine. So, there's a chance here, and I didn't write a story on it. If you go to the lower part of our page, we have a Russia and Ukraine section about kind of like what it's further up, about what Russia's saying about Zelensky, about what Zelensky's saying about Russia. Basically, it's not looking good. The chances of peace are not looking good, and it's really, I think, mainly the security guarantees are the thing. The fact that Ukraine wants, and Europe is even entertaining this idea of these like NATO-style security guarantees with Western troops in Russia, I think that's just what is sinking this peace effort. So the fact that that's failing and they're going to send these longer range missiles, not a good sign. All right, so the next one here, Ukraine attacks Russian nuclear power plant. This one's from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So Ukrainian forces hit a Russian nuclear power plant, causing a fire that was quickly extinguished. And Russian officials claim that a Ukrainian drone was downed near the Kursk nuclear power plant, the NPP, on Sunday, causing a small fire at the facility. The fire resulted in the power plant reducing the capacity at one of 3 units to 50%. The IAEA said that there were no injuries and there was no increase in radiation levels, so nothing major like that, but just something to highlight here. This power plant has come under repeated Ukrainian attacks, especially after Ukraine invaded Kursk. That's when we first started seeing these attacks on the power plant. They were eventually pushed out of Kursk, but Ukraine continues with these drone attacks. All right, so the next one here, Khamenei says the U.S. wants Iran to be obedient. So Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said on Sunday that the U.S. is seeking an obedient Iran and that the issue with the U.S. cannot be resolved through negotiations. So he said, quote, "They want Iran with its great history and its people with all their honor and glory to obey the U.S. Those who argue, why don't you hold direct negotiations with America and resolve your issues? In my opinion, they too are only seeing what's on the surface. That is not the essence of the matter. This is not a matter that can be resolved," end quote. And Khamenei said that the statements and actions from U.S. officials attempting to force Iran into obedience were greatly insulting and that Iran will stand up against those efforts. He said, quote, "The U.S. incited and aided the Zionist regime to attack Iran and finish the job. They had no idea that Iran, in response, would strike a blow so powerful that it would make them regret it," end quote. So, of course, since the end of the 12-day U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, the U.S. has continued to demand that Iran not enrich uranium on its soil. President Trump has threatened to bomb Iran if they restart that uranium enrichment program. And what are other, what has Iran's president been saying? What has the foreign minister been saying? They've been saying that they're open to talks with the U.S., but they want assurances that they're not going to be attacked again during the next round of negotiations. Well, the threats from Trump, along with the threats from Israeli officials, especially the defense minister, are having the opposite effect. Obviously, they want assurances they won't be attacked. Well, they keep getting threatened. So, there's just no chance. It doesn't seem like at the moment that there's going to be talks between the U.S. and Iran. Iran is holding talks this week with the UK, France, and Germany about the so-called snapback sanctions. So we'll see if that leads anywhere. I doubt it, though. All right, so the next one here, Lebanon's president has not been informed of Trump economic zone. So this one's from Jason Ditz. So last week it was reported that the U.S. was asking Israel to stop attacking Lebanon and that their plan for the region included creating a Trump economic zone in southern Lebanon along the border with Israel. So similar to the Armenia-Azerbaijan declaration where they're going to create a corridor, the Zangezur corridor, I believe it's called, from that Trump, it's like, I forget exactly what they called it, but it's something, Trump's name is in it, and it's going to be leased by the U.S. and developed by the U.S. I guess they have this similar idea for southern Lebanon, but apparently they haven't filled in the Lebanese about it, and the president, Joseph Aoun, said that he has never been informed about the plan in the first place, and he's also calling for an extension of the UNIFIL peacekeeper mandate in the area, though the U.S. is... Israel's asking the U.S. to use their veto to end that peacekeeping mission, so we'll see what happens there. But just a lot of uncertainty around the situation in Lebanon when you have the government saying they're going to disarm Hezbollah to placate the U.S., but at the same time, they can't really do that without potentially a civil war, which is probably ultimately what Israel is hoping for. All right, so the next one here, Syrian government postpones elections in Kurdish and Druze regions. This is another one from Jason. So Syria's parliament is shaping up to be a lot less unified than initially advertised, as the ruling government has announced that they're going to postpone elections for the People's Assembly in 3 provinces where groups likely to oppose the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham government live. The postponements in the Kurdish-controlled areas of Raqqa and Hasaka, as well as the Druze-heavy Suwaida in the south. And the official pretext for the delay is security concerns. They provided no timetable when they would allow a vote. The Kurds are not happy about this. They're saying that the regions that they control are actually the safest in Syria at the moment. And of course, the Druze down in Suwaida, after the fighting there and then the massacres by government forces, they're not going to be happy about the elections being postponed and everything. But we'll see. I mean, I'm not even if there's going to be elections across the country. I believe Shara said that Jelani said he has to be president for at least 3 years before there can be new elections. So I don't have much confidence in the chance of real democracy springing up here in this new Syria. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. Commandos prepping Mexico attack. So this is an article from Ken Klibenstein and Will Arkin at Ken Klibenstein's Substack. And basically it's about, I read it a while ago, but go check it out if you're interested. It's because he's been reporting on this plan to launch attacks, potentially drone strikes against cartels in Mexico. And this is about the military unit that would be involved here. And that is Special Operations Command North, or SOC North. So go give that a read if you have the chance. Certainly concerning movements in the direction of potential military actions against the cartels or turning it into a regime change op in Venezuela. All right, so the last story here, South Korean troops fire shots near North Korean troops. So this is another one from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. So tensions on the Korean Peninsula are spiking as South Korean troops fired on North Korean soldiers near the demilitarized zone. The friction between Pyongyang, Seoul, and Washington has escalated due to large-scale U.S. and South Korean war games. South Korea claimed on Saturday that its forces had fired on North Korean soldiers who had crossed the DMZ. North Korea strongly condemned the attack and said that Pyongyang informed Washington that its troops would be operating near the border to avoid a misunderstanding. And according to North Korea, they fired 10 warning shots with a 12.7 millimeter large caliber machine gun at North Korean soldiers. And they're saying this is very serious. And just tensions have been really building up in the past few days with these big war games and everything that's been happening in the Korean Peninsula. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Robert Torres, U.S. interest is not in committing to Ukraine. One from David Stockman, Russia and China are not threats to the U.S. One from Ramsey Baroud, War on Truth, why are Palestinian journalists being systematically erased? One from James Rushmore, the fake charge of anti-Semitism is losing its sting. Our spotlight from Nick Cleveland Stout, think tank staffer stumped when asked about arms industry funding. So please go check all that out. Lots of stuff in the lower part of the page. Lots of stuff about the situation in Gaza, the starvation, different stories about people living under it, and other stuff. Again, a lot of the back and forth between Russia and Ukraine with what they're saying to each other. Again, just not looking good on the chances for a peace deal. But that's everything for me for today. I hope everybody had a good weekend. You could always support us just by liking, subscribing, commenting. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to my Substack newsletter. I've basically just been posting the show over there, but trying to just get that built up a little bit. That's davedecamp.substack.com. Anyway, that is it. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.